Hello, guys and gals, me Mutahar, and ladies and gentlemen, it's been a while since I talked about the old Internet Archive, the Wayback Machine. The Internet Archives that are slowly getting attacked by, organizations like book publishers, the FBI, so on and so forth. Now, of course, ladies and gentlemen, I'm a huge supporter of the Internet Archive. I think most people who make internet content like me are, because without the Internet Archive, there'd be a lot of videos that I've made, big videos that wouldn't have been possible because we just couldn't dig up the origins of the internet. There's something about the internet. Anytime you post something, it's there forever. And large in part, the biggest reason for that is the Wayback Machine. Now, of course, the Wayback Machine, for anybody that doesn't know, you basically type in a URL over here and you get sent to an older archive of the internet, provided it's actually stored in this archive. And this is basically the Library of Alexandria on the internet. Losing this means losing internet history. Over 1 trillion web pages have been saved. And unfortunately, there's been a bit of a problem. So for a lot of the big publishers and news organizations and publications on the internet, they have basically started to block organizations like the Wayback Machine. So for instance, the New York Times says that their content isn't going to be on the Internet Archive, or they're going to be actively blocking every aspect, because guess what? Turns out the big AI companies, surprise, surprise, are ruining one other aspect of the internet. How? Because a lot of these organizations have been using the Internet Archive as a sort of sidestep to bypass paywalls, to bypass things, and access their content. So a lot of these websites, what they tend to do is they find a way to block off, internet bots. So for instance, if you go to youtube.com, or really any website, you can type in things like robots.txt, and this serves as a small little TXT file that basically tells internet scrapers, internet search tools, what they are allowed to use on the Google's website and what they aren't allowed to use. So typically they disallow things like the API, comments, yada, 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 get video, blah, blah, blah. And the reality of it is that this isn't a stop. It's like a nice way of telling the scraper, hey, please, don't scrape this. This doesn't mean that the scraper necessarily even has to follow these instructions. And surprisingly, guess what? AI companies do not like the topic of consent. They are very unconsensual when they come to your website and scrape every aspect of it just so that they can regurgitate that information in their nice chatbots. Now, listen, we've been talking about this for fucking years now, okay? For instance, when you look at sites like Reddit, back in 2023, we talked about how Reddit had these API changes, right? Back then, Reddit basically locked off a lot of the people that were using their free API. And the reason why they were blocking it off was that a lot of platforms like ChatGPT, Google, Anthropic, all these big AI companies were basically scraping the fuck out of Reddit to get access to this information. So they were abusing the API that was available and then basically costing Reddit money and resources, because every time you connect to their website or an AI does, it costs them money, it costs them bandwidth, it costs them resources. And surprisingly, I think Reddit, like many websites, just wasn't okay with the fact that they were basically getting pilfered, getting a big old bill, and everyone else is making money on their fucking dime. We talked about it with companies like Nvidia, where allegedly they've been alleged to pirate media off the internet. There have been huge lawsuits alleging some of the biggest tech companies of just pirating content off the internet and putting it into their models. And, you might be like, man, it's annoying that, people talk about piracy as this great fucking evil. I'm going to tell you right now, you do a lot less damage downloading a video game or a movie or a book than some of these big AI companies do that rake in fucking billions, trillions of dollars, basically stealing everyone else's work and regurgitating it. And then it's funny when they get mad, when they get fucking stolen from. Anyways, long story short, Reddit decides, you know what, we're going to block things like the Internet Archive. And Reddit, alongside plenty of other, publications, are like, yeah, we're just not going to let the Internet Archive grab information. Even they say the Internet Archive provides a service to the open web. But we've been made aware of instances where AI companies violate the platform policies, including ours, and just scrape data from the Wayback Machine. So all the effort that Reddit and all these sites put into blocking these AIs, they're like, well, fuck it. The Internet Archive isn't doing anything. And they just go right to the Internet Archive and violate TOS that way. I'll give you a great example of how an AI sort of does this visually so you can understand. Now here I have a artificial intelligence by the name of Quopus, which is basically Quen mixed in with Opus's distilled information. So yes, technically this is stolen data that's been retrained into another fucking AI and distributed for free for anybody to download and run on their local computers, which is what I've done here. I downloaded this model, cranked up that context, loaded it in, and I asked it, can you find everything you can about that Rockstar Games hack that just happened? So you can see basically what the AI does is it thinks to itself, hey, the user's asking about this Rockstar Games hack, could have occurred back in the day, but it also could have been something new. And then of course it searches on the Sierra XNG search engine that I've exposed it, locally of course. It enters this prompt, searches for all the results, and then it thinks to itself, whoa, look, these are all these crazy results. But then it finds that there are recent hacks beyond the old one that was trained into its data. So then it starts researching and researching and researching and regurgitates the information that it found on plenty of websites on the internet. Now here's the big thing. You can see in some cases when I ask it to search too, sometimes it fails the ability of reading the internet. And why does it do that? Because when it accesses certain websites like techspot.com, you can see that, for instance, it gets error 403, which is blocked by bot detection. Because guess what? An AI bot was trying to scrape their website, and they weren't okay with it. For instance, right over here, you can see that when I go to one specific website like IGN, IGN tells you, hey, don't scrape our site if you're a fucking bot. Now I'm going to show you what happens when, again, a lot of these tech agencies, a lot of these tech companies, they're good at bypassing consent. So here's what I've done. I've taken an AI agent like Hermes, and I basically gave it access to a browser known as CamoFox. Now what is CamoFox, you might ask? Well, I'll show you their website really quickly. CamoFox is a very, very good open source anti-detection browser, meaning that a lot of the blocks that these sites sort of build, well, CamoFox is a special browser designed to bypass those blocks. So at that point, I was like, all right, first off, figure out if you have access to this browser. It set it up on its own. You can even ask the AI, set up all of these technical files for me, and it'll do it. You know, sometimes it'll say you already configured it, which I did that. But then I asked it, okay, now use CamoFox to check IGN for the latest information on the Rockstar Games hack. So you can see the AI over here goes to, opens up the browser, goes to IGN, navigates IGN, clicks around, scrolls on the browser, gets snapshots, reads those snapshots, and then it says, hey, perfect, I found all the information on this, yada, yada, yada. By the way, the browser successfully loaded the page with anti-detection fingerprinting enabled. So earlier when IGN was saying, hey, don't scrape me, bot, I just used an anti-scraping browser to scrape IGN against their consent. Now, why I'm showing you this is because ultimately, at the end of it, ladies and gentlemen, this is what a lot of these big AI scumbags are doing. It doesn't matter if you tell OpenAI or Google or fucking anybody, hey, we don't consent to you scraping us. They'll find ways to do it. It doesn't matter. They're that good. And that's the ultimate problem. While you can blame companies like Reddit, you can blame companies like Twitter, even they fucking do it with Grok. You can blame tons of these publications, but this is a real horrific part of the internet that, unfortunately, because of these AI companies ruining fucking everything that we love, ruining all parts of the internet, this is just how it is, okay? The reason I show you these technical things is because I think it's easy for a lot of people who talk about this to have no nuance, right? They're like, either they're with the AI bros or they're not with the AI bros. Nobody looks at the tech itself like I show you on this channel, because I'm showing you this kind of stuff to visualize and show you just how these companies are bypassing it and how it's become almost this arms race, this like fucking cat and mouse game to keep the internet as human as we can. But then at the same time, you got a whole bunch of the other scumbags turning it into the AI festering slop hole that it is. You know, one of the reasons why a lot of people don't like to use Google, except they just go to ChatGPT, for instance, and type in a prompt, is because maybe the results are better. But nobody even verifies those results or checks if the actual source ChatGPT is pulling from isn't just, for example, another AI slop article. For instance, right over here, I went to this site, and this was SecQuest. This was on Google, for instance. And immediately when I look at this, I don't want to just outright say it, but I'm getting a lot of AI written vibes from this page right here. And again, it's difficult for me to check on the internet what is written by a human being, what is written by an actual bot. It's one of the reasons why anytime I Google things or even use SeerXNG, which is my primary search engine, I'm always typing in something like Reddit at the end of every single search. Because ultimately, I want to go to a place where human beings are talking about something as opposed to AI regurgitations. It doesn't help that sometimes when you're looking at, things like the Internet Archive being blocked, a lot of it can sometimes be AI overviews, which may be pulling in for incorrect information from a lot of platforms, right? Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's fucking dead wrong. And I think a lot of people have gotten to this like brain rot point where nobody's really verifying the shit they see on the internet, okay? It's fucking insanity. Now, I think it's funny as fuck to see how bad the scraping problem has gotten when even companies like Google, for instance, are talking about how they're taking legal action against organizations like SERP API for unlawful scraping, as they say. They literally have filed fucking lawsuits in this case against companies like SERP API. What does that company do? They basically take a Google search result like coffee and convert it to this gobbledygook. This is what an AI reads and understands, how to navigate a web page, right? This is the eyeballs of an artificial intelligence processing a Google search. And companies like SERP API or Tavili or any of these organizations kind of implement a lot of those great anti-browser blocking like techniques, because normally an AI wouldn't be able to search on Google. It would be blocked. But these guys have found a way to bypass Google's blocks and produce this information. And through Google search, you can access all of these links. Basically, an AI can access these links and go inside and look even deeper. That is how fucking cat and mouse this whole situation has gotten. So routing this whole thing back to the Internet Archive, I think the Internet Archive is a very, very important website. And I'll tell you why it's important. For a lot of journalists on the internet, they have found ways to use the Wayback Machine to basically fight against injustices in political administration. So in the US, but basically for instances like this, you got sites like USA Today that are looking into organizations like ICE. And inside situations like this, in order to access information, what they've done is apparently they have went to the Wayback Machine and they have actually identified all the way back to 2021 by basically going onto the ICE.gov's website, pulling information like these PDF files, and analyzing the data through all of them. And through this, they're able to correct the government's possible misinformation, because yes, the government does lie to you, and sometimes to hold it accountable, you have to go and literally look through the shit that the government probably doesn't want you to look through. It's a lot of reasons why whenever we cover things like Epstein, it's easy to go to justice.gov/Epstein and think the government is being totally transparent. But as you know, the government has removed information from time. They've brought back information. There have been things that possibly have been modified. And really the only one you can trust is the citizen, the third party, the independent journalist. So in that case, an Internet Archive analog like jmail.world is what you kind of use in order to actually truly verify and trust whatever it is that you're reading. This is probably more trustworthy, in my opinion, than getting your Epstein files from the government, because at least these people preserve this shit. Even if the government doesn't want you to look at certain files, you'll always be able to analyze files that are provided underneath this community repository. And of course, Internet Archive isn't the only archive service. There's archive.today, which is a little bit more intensive when it comes to archiving things like tweets and all this other stuff. But again, the important aspect of this, ladies and gentlemen, is that these are the fewest organizations that exist. And ultimately, a lot of these organizations rely on things like anonymity, donations, in order to keep a very important aspect of the internet alive, which is the fucking Internet Archive. If we don't have the Internet Archive, we're kind of fucked in a lot of ways, okay? The internet as we know it is basically only going to be presented the way the government and basically the leaders of legacy media want you to see. And any ability to correct the government or correct corporations or correct people in general is going to be gone away, because that fucking record of information is basically gone. And that's it. Now, the other thing is, obviously, the Internet Archive is not just there for websites. The big important thing for me, ladies and gentlemen, has always been the ability to download media that has been basically lost forever. For instance, I love Grand Theft Auto. One of the mods that I've been installing is this mod called GTA Carcer City. GTA fans have made an entire new GTA game. It's in a demo right now, but it's kind of insane to see. And the only way for me to get access to it is by basically downloading a version of the game. Because I can't go to Rockstar and be like, hey, here's $20, my boy. Can you give me access to GTA San Andreas 1.0? You can't download the original one off Steam. I don't even think you can download it from Rockstar's launcher. And we all know that Defective Edition ain't gonna be running old school mods. So really, the only way to do it is to go to the Wayback Machine or the Internet Archive, download an original version of the game because you can't fucking buy it, and install it that way. That's how insane this sort of story has sort of gotten. There's a lot of use cases for the Internet Archive. But the grim reality of it is that unfortunately, AI bros, tech bros, have basically been mainly responsible for ruining another aspect of the internet, which is preserving information, having a record of information, a historical record, because simply these companies are unable to ever consider ethically paying for their training data or ethically respecting the wishes of what a website wants and doesn't want. Basically, the quest for these AI companies to grab all these fucking, points of data, throw them into these big old models is more important than the actual preservation and the sanctity of the internet as we have. Basically, these trillion-dollar companies care more about their money, obviously, than they care about this technology that we, honestly, in my opinion, take basically for granted. But, ladies and gentlemen, yeah, the Internet Archive is kind of in a serious bit of danger. And, in the past, a lot of it could have been because of some of their actions, like the digital library lending. A lot of it could literally have been them biting off more than they can chew, maybe putting themselves in copyright crosshairs. But this, if they start getting blocked from some of the biggest central points of the internet, at that point, the point of the Internet Archive is effectively null and void. And one of the digital library of Alexandria is effectively kind of fucked. But yeah, ladies and gentlemen, I wanted to bring this up because this is important to me, and it should be important to you. And I think the only way to combat these crappy AI companies is to kind of show you what they're doing, how they're doing it, and just so people are more awake and more understanding, and more of a stink can actually be raised. Because the more these scumbags get away with their shit, the more people like Jensen Huang keep getting away with their shit, the worse all of it's going to get for the rest of us. So you better stop it now or remain in peace and silence forever, motherfucker. I am out.